Everybody ready?
I'm ready. You ready?
I'm going to go ahead and call our Thursday, June 1st, 2023 Roanoke County School Board work session to order. Madam Chair, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Linden?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here. Yes. All right. Can you read us into closed, Mr. Linden?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Roanoke County School Board convene in closed session for the following: to discuss ongoing personnel matters under investigation pursuant to the personnel exemption at 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, and for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation, and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Linden?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am. All right, we'll call our meeting back to order. Mr. Linden, when you read us out of close.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Roanoke County School Board come out of closed session for the following: to discuss ongoing personnel matters under investigation pursuant to the personnel exemption at 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, and for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation, and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia. I also move to certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the school board.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 2.03, action from closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to reassign employee 2022-2023, number 3, and reduce the salary accordingly.
Second that.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 3.01, project updates. Mr. Todd Cagles.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Nicely had asked me to do some project updates. We have probably, 50-plus projects going on right now, so I chose the 10 kind of, most visible ones. But if you guys have questions about anything else, certainly feel free to ask. In terms of our elementary renovations coming up, we've hired a PPEA consultant, contracted with them. They're supposed to have the solicited proposal draft to us next week, June the 5th. We've also contracted for NESHAP reports at both schools. Those are the most comprehensive, we believe, the most comprehensive asbestos inspections that we can do without, going in and starting to tear out walls and that sort of thing. So no report can guarantee that the buildings are 100% asbestos-free or guarantee to find everything that's there, but these are the most comprehensive ones that we've been able to find. So the idea is to avoid what we have going on at Bird High right now, where we were surprised and then had a delay in the project. So that work is starting this week. We've also already contracted for the site surveys, so that Balzer is doing that for us, so that as soon as we get a contractor in place, they'll be able to start construction as soon as possible. They're also doing the site survey for the CTE Center. They're out there. They'll start on that shortly. The PPA consultant is also working on that one, and we have also contracted for rezoning services for the CTE Center. Our schedule there is we're trying to be ready for the July 14th application deadline, which would take it to the Planning Commission on September the 6th, and then the Board of Supervisors on September 25th for rezoning. The artificial turf at Northside High School, Mr. Linden and I have already kind of discussed that. They are, their excavation is mostly complete. They're starting the install of the drainage system and are projected to be done by the end of July. We'll still have some track repair and fence repair to do when they're done, but so far everything looks like it should be done in time for football season, which is our goal. Williamburg High School renovations, we've discussed the asbestos abatement piece. Work is scheduled to begin next week. It's got a 16-week window to do the abatement. The gym floor materials are on site. They're actually sitting over there in the gym now. They're waiting to be installed. The installation is still on schedule to be completed by the end of August. We have some retracting goals we're putting up in the gym there. We've ordered materials for those. Just waiting on installation to schedule the installation once the materials actually arrive on site. The main office, they pulled all the furniture and all this stuff out of there. They're starting work in there now, doing the sprinkler system, the painting and the carpet. That should be done before school starts. And the counseling office and the media center are substantially complete, and they are occupied now. Mr. Hudson, we got that courtyard up in Glenver Elementary. It was delayed just a little bit. It was supposed to be done in May, but the equipment didn't come in, the playground equipment that goes in there, so it should still be done by the time school starts. Delivery of the equipment is scheduled for June, and then it is going to be the first of the installations that we do once that equipment's here. We're doing 7 other playgrounds, but that one's going to be first so that we can have it ready to go by the time school starts next year. The Denton bus lot, we have determined that it's pretty much got to stay where it is. We worked with the County of Roanoke and the town of Denton, and all those efforts ended up coming to really nothing, and it pretty much has to stay where it is. And we're developing the scope of work to publish an IFB as soon as we enter the new budget year, and we plan to do that hopefully this summer, depending on when our contractor can get to it, but early on in the 23-24 school year for sure. Playgrounds, all of phase 1 is complete. That was 7 playgrounds. We've got another 7 playgrounds in phase 2. Delivery of the first 3 sets of equipment is scheduled for early June, and that install will start right after the Glenver Courtyard. Just a few of the minor capital projects. We have the Oak Grove sanitary line. We had actually 2 out there that had to be replaced. One's complete. The other one is waiting on some concrete structures to be delivered. Should be there in early June. Burlington, down here we have the kitchen floor. That's actually starting tomorrow, and the floor replacement will begin next week. All the equipment's being removed from there tomorrow. Out at Glenver Elementary, we've already replaced the line and just need to do the backfill in the next couple of days. And then down here at Glen Cove, they're actually down there cutting concrete now, and the plumbing is just waiting on the grease trap to be delivered, and then we'll move forward with that. But again, all of those projects are on schedule to be completed this summer. No delays. Everything looks good. Glenver Elementary School, we're going to connect it to public water. We've actually been working with the Western Virginia Water Authority. We've had 2 situations this year where that school, it was questionable as to whether or not it was going to need to be shut down because of a power failure, which we can kind of ride out for a period of time. But to the elementary school, because it's on a well, it shuts down their water, and that becomes a problem with using the restrooms and having a water supply. So we're going to move them over to public water. Been working with Western Virginia Water Authority. They've been great. We actually think that this is going to be doable at minimal expense and be able to done pretty quickly, because we're going to be able to use the meter that's already in place for the high school, tie into it after the meter, which means the water authority doesn't even have to be involved. We'll just branch right off of that, have a single meter for both schools. They're actually in close proximity to one another already, so it's only like a 5-foot trench. So should be able to do it quickly and relatively inexpensively. We're just waiting for final confirmation from the water authority on the size of that meter. But they've given us the initial report, and it seems like it's going to be fine. The sale of Pogue Farm, we are working with Roanoke County to publish the RFP. I actually heard back from them yesterday, and they expected to have the draft end of this week or early next week to get the real estate agent in place, and then we'll proceed with listing that. And we've been working with our attorney regarding the current tenant and the lease extension agreement. Anybody have any questions about any of that or anything else we're doing?
I got 2.
Yes, sir.
With Bird, do we have an update on the timeline?
For completion of the entire project, in terms of, all the way out to having the trailers removed, they're looking at May of next year.
Okay. I was asking mainly for the SRO piece of that. And then Burton, the traffic survey. I remember when we were first talking about this, that they didn't believe a traffic light needed to go there, but I don't see how that's possible with school buses. Did they?
Yeah, and that's not what they've determined from the study. I have received a copy now. I actually got it late yesterday, and they are recommending a signal there. at that
Good.
intersection.
I was concerned for student safety pulling out onto Peters Creek with the level of traffic there, especially school buses. That's good to hear.
Yeah, and that was pre-meeting with the county. We met with county and with VDOT and discussed all of that, and that was the consensus, was that there needed to be a signal there.
Great. Makes me feel a lot better for our students.
Yep.
Do we have an update on the stadium lights over at William Byrd? Are they in
Oh, yeah,
already?
they're in,
Oh.
and they used them all spring.
Oh, nice.
Mr. Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you getting me a cost on the mat for the high jump.
Sir.
Cave Spring, I'll be talking to my colleagues and see what we can do. Because we did install the track without any cost to Roanoke County.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
the asbestos abatement, will it hold up any other projects?
Any other projects not related to the renovation of the high school?
Yes,
No, there's nothing else that should be affected by the abatement
it won't be
process.
affected. And also, we do that a lot, I guess, abatement. You say 6 weeks. You don't foresee there would be a problem within abating that in that period of time?
Just to be clear, it's 16 weeks.
Maybe I read it wrong. 16 weeks?
16 weeks, 4 months.
Okay, so it is gonna affect some operation, I guess.
Well, it's,
At the high school, for sure.
yeah, but it's contained in the area that's not currently usable anyway, so it's, there's nothing outside of that should be affected in terms of the operation of the school. That's the area that would be undergoing renovation right now anyway, so it'll be sealed off from the rest of the school. Remember at the last meeting, we asked
Yeah.
for the money to do the third-party air quality monitoring
Yeah, that's
outside of
what I
that
was
area,
saying.
so it really, considering that was already an unusable area of the building, there shouldn't be much impact in terms of
So
school operations.
student, teachers, staff will all be safe from any,
Yes, sir.
And air
They'll monitor inside, and then we're paying somebody extra to monitor outside just to be sure that there are no.
and they monitor constantly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kegels.
Keep up the good work.
Staying busy.
Item 3.02, Health Instructional Resource Adoption, Mr. Brian Weeks.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yeah, this is just one more time around with adoption. Social studies got held up, but health went forward, and Kevin Bertram and myself sort of spearheaded the operation, and essentially we adopted Goodhart Wilcox for the middle and high school health program. And on a separate committee, RE Performance was the one that was chosen for the, sorry, my eyes are not as good as they used to be.
Join the crowd.
I should probably put my glasses on. For the elective fitness courses. So, were there any questions about the write-up or any general questions about the adoption? All right.
No.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Item 3.03, Update on Grading, Mr. Mike Riley, Ms. Stephanie Hogan.
While we're waiting there, Dr. Nicely, do we need to, does that become an action or a consent agenda
It
item?
would go on consent.
What we,
The health, yeah,
The adoption would go on consent, yes, sir.
Okay.
thank you for clarifying.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members, Dr. Nicely. Wanted to take a little time to give you guys an update on where we're at with our grading practices and policy update. I know back in April, we had talked a little bit about it. We were looking at some policy changes. We had looked at kind of final assessments and how those were playing out. And as a result of that conversation, we've started looking at this. So we want to give you guys an update. We want to start with a background. Our policy on grading, really, if you look at it, there's been a few tweaks, but really hasn't changed in the last 20 to 30 years. And if you look at our policy and our ARs, they're actually pretty strong and pretty strongly worded. Our policy states, and the AR 6.17 is up there right now, states that grades must reflect learning of content standards rather than factors like behavior or work habits. So the policy itself is really strong, but of course, it's always given wide discretion to teachers in setting up their grade books, deciding what categories to use, how many points things we're going to count. So that led to a wide variation, even among teachers teaching the same course. So you could have teachers within the same building grading things very differently, even with this policy. And of course, the philosophy reflected in the existing policy is strong. We feel good about the policy itself. It's just the application and teacher practice that we need to make sure we streamline and make sure everything's aligned. We'll go to the next one. So just to give a background, this is actually something in the instructional department we've been looking at and working on for a while. This was actually a major focus. If you made it to any part of the leadership retreat last year, we actually brought someone in to talk to leadership about grading and grading practices. We spent much of the year working with the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee to look at best practice, and we actually created a best practice guide that we gave members of the board I think it was last summer. We had this that basically outlined best practice when it came to assessments. We passed that out. All teachers had copies of this. Principals had copies of this that we introduced to kind of prepare and equip teachers. And really, this year, we kind of called the year of awareness, making sure staff were aware of what our best practices were. Go ahead. So that brings us to this point now. Really, our next steps will be to move from kind of guidance towards a policy change as teachers gain knowledge and experience. Of course, we said back in April, the school board expressed interest in learning more about grading and moving forward with kind of bringing some of these things under one umbrella. So our next steps this summer is Ms. Hogan is going to be working with a group of elementary folks, I think next week, pulling them together to do some preliminary work. I'm going to be working with secondary administrators and teachers the following week to start to review our current policies, to expand kind of where we're at right now and develop a draft plan for expansion of our current policy.
And basically with this, we have some goals that we're looking at to improve our grading practices. That's what our goal is. And what we want to have is better consistency across teachers that teach the same courses. We want to make sure that that consistency is there so that regardless of what class you're in, the grades that they receive would pretty much be similar in terms of how the grade categories are properly weighted and calculated. Also, we're going to use some educational research and best practice to ensure that the grades accurately reflect demonstrated mastery of content standards. We want to make sure that our students are meeting those content standards and they're being evaluated by the grades that they receive. And then last, we want to raise academic expectations and standards for all students by ensuring that grades accurately reflect the students' demonstrated mastery of the content standards and less vulnerable to grade inflation. So those are the goals of what we would like to look at. One of the things that we wanted to show you is a video. What we're going to be doing and talking about with elementary is moving towards a standards-based report card. And this video that actually Mr. Williams found kind of gives you a little background of what we're looking at doing. Let me see if the volume's up. Yeah, mine's going, Mark. Go ahead, try it now.
Does the sound go through the active ward or?
Yeah. But it's wired, I know it. The way it's wired, it's going
Stephanie can play the sound on her computer.
Well, can we make sure for the room, I mean, that's probably most important right now.
Yeah.
How can we refigure towards, that we can hear in the room?
Let Stephanie.
Yeah. Way back down.
Turn the active board back down.
Yeah.
So just go ahead and escape and then,
I would hit stop and then take your computer up there and plug into that. Is that her computer up there now?
Yeah.
It is,
yeah,
but it's running through the whole system.
Yeah, it's,
just going through the system. I hate that because, and I actually practiced this 3 times to make sure that it worked.
Well, so can you,
there's a closed caption button there.
can you hook up directly, instead of going that way, can you hook up from the active board to your laptop so we can hear it in the room?
Yeah. That should work.
Chuck's smiling somewhere, knowing his value.
That's it. He's asking for a raise after
Yeah.
this.
Where is Tim? Nice.
Oh, thanks, we're right up there.
What's that?
Suppose that today you
Oh,
went
there you
back to school and took the normal courses of study, math, reading, science, and social studies. But in addition to those courses, there was also a class called Walk. At the end of the grading period, you earned letter grades for your performance in all those courses, and in the class called Walk, which is a course that teaches and assesses walking, you earned a B. How do you feel about this? Some of you are probably thrilled because before this, the highest grade you ever received in any class was a C. Still, others might think something along the lines of, I haven't tripped or fallen in like 4 years. Shouldn't I have an A? What if you earned a B for walking and every other person you know earned Ds? Do you feel better about your score now? Does this make you think that you're even more skilled at walking? What if they all earned A's? Do you feel worse? At this point in the example, you might start thinking to yourself, what does it even mean to earn a B in walking anyway? And if you're asking yourself that question, you're at a point where you can understand why our school district is moving away from a traditional grading system and toward a standards-based system. To illustrate both the reasoning for this switch as well as potential benefits and outcomes, I'd like to continue with the example of walking class, except instead of imagining you're attending, let's put age-appropriate students into this example. We'll take a few toddlers and enroll them in the School of Walk. Here we have 3 toddlers, Henry, Liv, and Adam. Each toddler is about 9 months old and has parents who are proud to enroll them in the School of Walk, which specializes in teaching toddlers to walk over the course of the next 6 months. Henry is enrolled in Mr. Tuffman's class, Liv is in Miss Master's class, and Adam is in Mrs. Morepoint's. At the end of the grading period, they're provided with a report card. Henry, who can now not only walk, but can run and jump, earned an F for the course. Liv, who can stand while holding on to something and take a few uneasy steps, earned a C. And Adam, who can only scoot like a seal and roll over, earned an A. On the surface, these grades may seem unfair. However, each of these grades can be justified using the same grading system nearly all of us experienced in school ourselves. During the course of study, each student was graded on one assignment each month, and those were averaged into a final grade for the course. Each of Henry's assignments were based on the skill of actually walking. Henry, who did not demonstrate a walking ability for quite some time, earned a 0 on the first 3 walking assignments. Maybe he couldn't walk, or maybe he just refused to. However, on the 4th, 5th, and final assignment, Henry earned 100%, as he not only walked, but ran across the room and jumped over some toys in the way. His teacher, Mr. Tuffman, using the same system that's been used for many years, averaged all the assignment grades together, and the math showed that Henry earned an F at 50%. Henry's parents are concerned about his grade because their son can walk, run, and jump, but has been marked as a failure. Liv was lucky to have Miss Masters, a more experienced teacher who knew that toddlers progress in skill related to standing, balancing, and so forth before being able to fully walk. In her class, assignments were not all based on walking, but on the skills leading up to walking, with the final assignments addressing specifically the skill of walking. Like in Mr. Tuffman's class, there was an assignment each month, but instead, the difficulty of the assignments increased over time. Liv earned 100% for standing, 100% for balance, and so forth, but earned a 50% on the last 3 assignments. The average of all those grades turned out to be a C. But what does a C mean? Finally, Adam still scoots on his belly, but earned an A with Mrs. Morepoint's. Mrs. Morepoint's grades the same as Miss Masters, except for one difference. Mrs. Morepoint's provides extra credit in the form of extra movement. She believes this is a good idea because even if the toddler is unable to walk, moving around shows that they're trying. Additionally, students don't lose self-esteem by having a low grade. Adam earned low grades on every assignment since the first, but was able to complete extra credit assignments, and with the extra credit added, his grade results in an A. Adam's parents are thrilled that their child earned an A and leave the school happy, unaware their child is developmentally far behind. Within a traditional grading system, the mathematical calculation of each of these grades is generally accepted, which is precisely why a traditional grading system can be severely flawed, and why educational systems around the world are making the shift to standards-based grading. Within a standards-based grading system, students are not graded on their accumulation of points or an average of points from each assignment. Many assignments and activities are meant as practice to help students learn the skill or knowledge they're meant to acquire. In the School of Walk, the toddlers were meant to acquire the skill of walking as defined by a standard. A standard is an agreed-upon level of skill or knowledge that a student is meant to demonstrate by the end of a learning period. Courses of study likely have multiple standards for student performance. A single standard for the School of Walk might read something like, student will be able to walk 10 feet without hesitation or falling. It's a measurable benchmark that can be assessed by any teacher or evaluator. The measure of success on the part of the student would not be rated on an ambiguous A to F scale, but instead as a descriptive scale, such as exceeds, proficient, approaching proficiency, and beginning. Additionally, the teachers at the school would evaluate the standard and the proficiency scale to determine specifically what it means for a student to meet each level in relation to the standard. For example, a student who exceeds the standard of walking would walk or run farther than the 10-foot distance. A student who's proficient can walk 10 feet without falling. One who is approaching proficiency can walk fewer than 10 steps without holding on to something for support, while a child who's beginning can't take steps without support. For more information, visit nampa.schools.
Okay, so that gives you, there we go. As we look at, elementary specifically, but before we get to the standards-based report card, basically some anticipated outcomes that we're looking for here in Roanoke County is that we would like to extend and refine our standards-based grading for grades K through 5. And with that, because that would improve accuracy of reporting to students and parents. And I'm going to show you an example of one of those here in just a moment. For the middle and high school, I know that you guys are looking to develop a more detailed grade system with expectations for consistency across similar courses, more accurately report student achievement. So with standards-based grading, this is an example of two report cards. The traditional report card on the right side is the one that we currently have in Roanoke County. For grades K and 1, we already do standards-based grading with those youngsters. And then for grades 2 through 5, we do the normal A, B, C, D, and F grades. With a standards-based report card, what happens is for each of the subject areas, it would break down the standards for parents as well as for the teacher of what they would be expected to be able to do. And then they would be rated based upon if they would meet those standards. And the ratings, this is just one example of a report card where 1 would indicate that the student would be advanced, the 2 would mean they met the standard, the 3rd would mean approaching the standard, 4 would be below, and then an X would mean that it had not yet been introduced. So for our parents and our teachers, for students in K through 1, this is something that they're already familiar with their child. And what we would like to do is be able to extend that to grades 2 through 5. With standards-based grading, it's basically a philosophy, and it does raise academic standards by ensuring that grades only reflect the content mastery. And by spelling out those standards specifically on a report card, that's what we're focusing on. Instead of other factors that lead to grade inflation. Once again, like I said, we've been using standard-based grading for kindergarten and 1st grade for decades with Roanoke County. And then, of course, we have school divisions, not only in the state of Virginia, but also in the U.S., that have been expanding standard-based grading because it keeps the focus on learning. It provides parents with actionable feedback on their children's progress. As a parent, you would be able to look at the report card and, for example, in reading, if they were working on something like figurative language, they would identify whether they had met that standard or not, and if they didn't, the parent would know specifically that that's the area that they would need to work with their child on. It also uses traditional assessments and focuses on measures of learning mastery. The type of assessments that they use in the classroom, they wouldn't necessarily change. What would change would be the way that they would be evaluated based on the number system or the letter system that we use for standard-based grading. And then also it reduces grade inflation. So with us for standards-based grading, what we will be doing is we'll be examining and looking at some different report card samples here in Virginia with some different school divisions and working with the committee to gather information about what that type of report card could look like for our students as we move forward for this following school year. And then middle and high school.
And then at the middle and high school, we're going to be looking at weighted grading systems. Total point systems are really easy to skew one way or the other. Weighted grading systems kind of maintain consistency across those different content areas. So we'll be looking at that. And again, working with the committee this summer to figure out what that looks like in terms of what should be weighted what. One of the things that did come up in April is we want to look at the role of final exams in the grading policy and probably adjusting what that looks like. We want to make sure that there's subject area specificity. What a grade scale and system looks like in a math class is going to be very different than it would look like in a band class. They can't have the same grading system because they're assessing in different ways on different things. One of the things when you go to a weighted system is to make sure that you have a minimum number of assignments within each category. If you have too few assignments, then those individual assignments count way too much towards the total grade. So there has to be a minimum number of assignments that teachers would have. And then some things that at the secondary level we'll have to work with the committee and talk with teachers about is what role does homework have in an assessment system? Truly, the purpose of homework is practice, to make sure that you practice the skills. So oftentimes, and you saw in that video, if homework counts too much, it can actually inflate the grade because you're looking at the practice and not necessarily the mastery of the skill. The other issue you often have with homework is anything done outside of the classroom, you're never assured of who's doing the work as opposed to what a student's doing in the classroom. What role does extra credit have? You saw in that example that extra credit can really inflate a grade. and you're not really sure if the students mastered the content, if extra credit plays too large a role. And then what do you do with late work? The student may understand the concept and demonstrate mastery of the concept, but they may end up having a grade that's lowered quite a bit just because some of that work got turned in late. So not that there shouldn't be a penalty, but we need to make sure that it's consistent and it's reasonable, so that really the idea behind, certainly the elementary standards-based, but also at the middle and high school, that when you see a grade, that grade reflects the student's understanding and mastery of the content. In other words, I was a chemistry teacher. When a student got an A in a chemistry class, you would want that to indicate not that the student figured out a way to get 90% of the points in the class. A term that I've kind of coined when I talk with people about these things is point harvesters. You have kids who turn into point harvesters, and truly, they figure out how many points do I need to get this, and the question becomes not, do I need to learn this, but how many points is it worth me even doing? And what we want to do is disincentivize that, and really we want an A at the end of the course to mean you've mastered the content, not you've figured out a way to accumulate enough points to get that grade, so that it actually means something. So that's one of the things we want to make sure that we work with the committee and teachers on, to make sure they understand that, and that we have a system that truly represents what a student knows.
Quick question. In
Yes,
terms
sir.
of accreditation, does accreditation come in with any of this? In
Like-
terms of how we're grading?
In terms of schools being
State
accreditation?
accredited.
No, it doesn't. It would not impact that at all, no.
So is there anything that kind of gives a guideline to this except what we've currently been doing? I mean, does the state have any mandates like?
There's no mandates in terms of how things have to be graded, especially at the secondary level. Certainly when you get into credit-bearing classes, there's requirements in terms of seat time and certain content that kids have to cover and things like that.
Well, like
But in
from a-
terms of how grades are done, the state gives great leeway, at least at this point.
What about colleges? When colleges are looking at students' GPAs, how is that? Because I mean, what you're telling me, there's really no fair playing field here. If a student is at a school district that it has a light policy versus a school district that has a higher level of expectation, where does this fall into play, fairness for our students?
Well, that's correct. Now, I will tell you, most colleges have extensive experience working with students from different districts, and they understand the systems. Many colleges, when you report your GPA, will only look at unweighted. As you know, like for instance, we weight certain classes, you get more quality points. Like an AP or dual class, if you get an A in those classes, you get a 5 on a 4-point scale, which is why at the end of the year we have as many valedictorians as we have, because anybody who scores above a 4.0 on our scale when you graduate is considered a valedictorian. Many colleges, when they look at that now, unweight the grades. Like they take all of that out. They'll also look at their grading scale, and they also understand historically how students from a division have done. So like for instance, in Roanoke County, because we do have high academic standards and our students traditionally have been very successful, they moved on, that's taken into account when they look at our students' transcripts.
I'd like to add one thing to your point, Mr. Hudson. In fact, we have a meeting next week with the state superintendent. She'll be in Roanoke. We're going to meet with the area superintendents to talk about what the state has in mind in terms of looking how our accreditation system is done versus what they're now contemplating, talking about accountability, which is typically tied toward your SOL test results and that kind of thing. My point in saying that is we do have an interest as a school system to make sure that the grades that a student, earns in a class aligns with the performance on the SOL test. We shouldn't have situations in which a student's getting an A in a class but then failing the SOL test, or vice versa. And so one of the things that teachers do and do very successfully when they sort of get this going is they make sure they align the assessments they give in class with not only make sure they're testing the right content, but also at the right level of rigor, making sure that the level of difficulty of those tests they give in the classroom kind of match up with what kids can expect to see on the SOL test. So there is a bit of an interest in making sure those things match in terms of that relationship. I mean, to your point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Mr. Chairman, you know, you talk about the committee, and the involvement of the teachers is so critical here, because they've got to be able to, they're the ones that's gonna be implementing the standards, they're gonna be implementing, and they should be involved. I assume that the committee has teachers
Yes, sir.
involved in this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We definitely will have teachers in these initial meetings, and then at the secondary level, because we have to have that subject specificity, we'll actually pull together groups of teachers from each content area to build out what the grading system would look like, say, in a science class. So we'll get science teachers together to work on that. We'll get math teachers to work on what the math grading system would look like in terms of what the weights should be and how different things are counted. You'll get performing arts teachers together to do the same thing. So we want them integral, very involved in the process. And then really once we get into the fall, we'll kind of hopefully have this built out for teachers, but we'll still have a year before we would look to make this a thou shalt kind of thing, for teachers to be able to ask questions, to push back, to make sure we have what's right for our students and teachers in the following school year.
Okay, I agree, they have to totally be involved.
Yes, sir.
So, is there a bigger difference in grading scales that you see, or grading differences in primary and secondary education?
In terms of the grading scale, no.
Or the grading practices, I guess I should say, instead of scale.
I think that, and I can only speak for elementary, I know for elementary teachers, they will spend quite a bit of time doing redos and retakes, and that's why this standards base lends itself so well to the grading for K through 5, because what happens is when they don't meet mastery of content, many times they will go back and tutor or remediate the child and then go back and reassess them. So with that, knowing the specific standards that they need to meet, the teacher would then be able to pinpoint for parents, or if they have someone who's working or tutoring with them as well, the areas where they need additional support.
Do these grade, I guess for lack of better, team leaders or grade leaders, they get together and they,
Like department chairs.
department chairs or like first grade, second grade, whatever,
Oh, behind, like the elementary, you have your grade level
grade level.
chairs.
Oh, yeah, we have grade level
And
chairs.
does that sort of give a grade standard between those? I mean, a
Not
teaching standard?
necessarily. Each teacher, up until this point has been permitted to work and to set up their grade books based on the assessments and assignments and things that they have. But many times, like you're sharing, when they do meet as teams, like as a first grade team or second grade team, a lot of times they're planning together anyway, and so they're grading the same assignments and having the same number of homework assignments and projects and those things in the classroom, so many times it will be similar.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I mean, to your point, we've got great teachers who've got this down, who have great practice. We're just, the whole aim for this across the board, elementary as well as secondary, is just to have better consistency across the board so that, again, our current policy says the grade should reflect mastery of the standards. And so we want to make sure that we kind of shore that up and make sure that we do that more consistently across our 27 schools.
Thank you.
And then just in summary, the next steps is basically going to be have an action plan, just to lay that groundwork for moving from the guidance that we've had towards policy change as teachers gain knowledge and experience. Of course, as Mr. Riley shared in April of this year, the school board had expressed interest in learning more and moving forward. Like we said, we do have a grading committee at each level that's going to work this summer to review expanded grading policies from other divisions, and then to develop a draft expansion of our current policy for pilot implementation. One thing I wanted to share with you about elementary just briefly is we will be having a committee that will be working and exploring these different report cards and what standards-based grades will look like for the teachers. And I'll be doing that in partnership with Mr. Williams. And then what we plan to do is to develop a timeline so that we can get out to the schools and start providing training to teachers so that they would have that, and like Mr. Riley had shared, opportunities to ask questions or to kind of give us feedback on things that we need to tweak or change as we move through the course of the year. So we'll be spending quite a bit of time at the elementary level because this will be a bigger lift, working with those individuals. So we're not going to just come up with a report card and tell them this is how we're doing it. We're going to make sure that they have lots of opportunity to provide us feedback and to ask questions. And then, of course, like I said, we'll be gathering that feedback from teachers, and then of course students, and then parents will also be providing them with information so that they will become familiar with what that will be looking like for their child as they're beginning to see some differences in the grading policy that we have here in Roanoke County. Any other questions or comments for us?
This summer, when you're working through, will the teachers be involved at that point?
Yes, we have teachers that are on our initial committee that we have, and we have principals that are part of it as well. And then from there, what we'll do is then we'll start branching out and getting into schools and working with teachers on it from that point forward.
Okay, thank you.
Be interesting to see what you come up with.
That's right, we're excited about it. I know Mr. Williams is really excited about it too. It's something he's been talking about for a while.
Good.
I appreciate you all's affirmation. I mean, I know some people sometimes we get frustrated with the pace with change like this, but this is quite a major change in a lot of fronts, and you really want to bring people with you and equip people and so forth. Sometimes if you just throw it out there, you're not going to achieve that consistency and uniform results you want because people aren't prepared. And so we really are trying to do this methodically and thoughtfully. I know Ms. Fashani is not here this evening. She expressed interest in this especially, and had provided some examples of some policies for us to look at from Virginia Beach and Norfolk, which Virginia Beach has the standards-based grading in elementary schools. We thought that was a good thing to look at, and then Norfolk had a nice layout in terms of what we were looking at with the secondary, with setting some parameters around those grade book setups and so forth. So that was good things for us to look at.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think getting the parent and teacher feedback's great.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We want to make sure that they're clear and answer the questions that they may have also. Yes.
All right.
Very good.
3.04, summaries of the 2023-2024 federal grants.
All right. This is us again, and I think Mr. Jones is going to plug us in. You can see the screens up here. What Ms. Hogan's getting set up all. Ms. Hogan worked with Title I and Title III grants. I worked with Title II and Title IV. So while she's getting ready, I'll just briefly summarize. Wow. Thank you. There you go.
Right.
I'll briefly summarize. Of course, you can read through the details of what these grants do. Title II is primarily our professional development grant. We run we've got some local funds we use for professional development, but primarily a lot of what we do in terms of supporting teachers through various professional developments, ability to attend conferences, take classes, things like that, run through our Title II grant. It allows us to have provisional teachers that can take classes that they need to get full licensure, those types of things. So again, Title II is primarily what we use for all different types of professional development. And then Title IV is fairly new. It's only been around for about 4 or 5 years now. It's got three pots of money that it comes with. One is to support well-rounded education for all students. The other is to provide a safe and healthy learning environment for students. And then finally, to help with technology integration. What we have decided to do with that grant is, one, we use that to support our PBIS program, the training and all the different things that Dr. McClung does with her group. We fund through our Title IV grant. The last couple of years, we've been working with our librarians. This past year at the high school, each high school library was able to purchase about $3,000 worth of equipment for their library for students to come in and do projects and things like that from their classes. This next year, we're going to be able to do the same thing at the middle school with this grant. So we'll utilize funds for that. And then finally, just in terms of making sure that all our students have access to the different programs, we use this grant to pay dual enrollment fees for students that are identified as disadvantaged, as well as for AP tests, because those are fees that aren't waived by either Western or the College Board. So we go ahead through this grant and pick up those fees so that those students aren't charged anything to take those college-level classes or those college-level examinations.
And with Title III, it is a program that basically supports student achievement. And with the funding, it is our largest grant. It's almost $1.4 million that we receive. The bulk of our monies for Title I is used for staffing at the 6 Title I schools. And then we also use the monies to support student instruction through tutoring and remediation. We also use it for professional development for teachers. And then lastly, we use it for parental involvement with our parents. We do have 6 schools that will still qualify for Title I next year, and that's going to be Burlington, Herman L. Horn, Masons Cove, Mount Pleasant, Mountain View, and W.E. Cundiff. So those same schools still qualify to be Title I schools for next year. We do expect from the state that we might get a slight increase in the funding, so we're looking forward to that. And then in terms of positions that we have at those schools, they consist anywhere from Title I teachers, instructional assistants, as well as a parent involvement specialist with Title I as well. And then with Title III, that's a much smaller grant. That is a grant that relates to our English language learners, and the bulk of those monies that we use for ELL is to use for professional development, for instruction, for teachers to receive training. And then we also use it to pay for interpreters, for those that we may need at different meetings for our students. And then also we pay for tutors to work with our youngsters at both elementary and secondary to receive services using those monies as well.
Are we on the brink of, do you know if we're on the brink of any of our schools close to being Title I, like any?
Yes, we have one school in particular that is close to being possibly Title I. And what we're going to do this year is we're going to monitor them in terms of their free and reduced lunch rate. And then if they meet that threshold, then what we would do is develop a plan because we have to submit that to the state for them to be approved. And we would look at adding them possibly for the following year.
Okay. Is that Condiff Cove or
That would be Glen Cove.
Glen Cove?
Mm-hmm.
And especially with the new building, I guess, of the apartment complexes or whatever they are building down here, that could affect that as well.
Yes, it could. Yes, sir. And so we're monitoring them closely to see if they may possibly qualify. And I've spoken to Ms. Young about that as well, too.
Okay, great.
So is this an information thing, or does the board need to take action on
This
this?
would go to consent.
Yes.
If there aren't any other questions, this would go consent, and then we would present these at the school board meeting to be signed by the chairman and
So the way that
superintendent.
The way that normally works, you all appropriate what we're putting it in for. When we
Right.
actually get the money from the feds, that could change, and they'll come back and say what the changes are.
Right.
Are any of these dollar amounts significantly different from past years?
No, we've seen, at least in my 2 grants, we've seen a steady increase of probably 2 or 3% every year. My guess is it kind of accounts for inflation over time. So my guess is we level fund from year to year. So these are the dollar amounts that we operated with this past year. We'll get our allocations from the state probably in late August. And then we just amend the grant with a different dollar amount and send it back into the state. So that what we'll do if you approve this at the next meeting, we'll submit it to the state and it's programmatically approved. Basically, they approve the program and then we have to submit an amendment to that grant with the new dollar amount.
Yes, sir. That's all we have for today then. Meeting adjourned.